Good afternoon, everyone. There's a saying that we've all heard before: big boys don't cry. Or maybe you've heard its cousin: crying is a sign of weakness. These are the messages we grow up with, teaching us to swallow our emotions and bury our pain. But let me tell you something: crying is not the problem. Crying alone is. Human beings are not designed to do life in isolation. Think about it. From the moment we are born, our survival depends on connection. We cry and someone comes to comfort us. We laugh and someone laughs with us. Connection is wired into our DNA. So why, when we grow older, do we start hiding the very things that make us human? Vulnerability is often misunderstood in our world. Many see it as a liability, an exposure of weakness, or a crack in the armor we've worked so hard to build. Society trains us to mask our true feelings, to keep up appearances, and to project strength at all times. But this notion couldn't be further from the truth. Vulnerability, far from being a sign of frailty, is one of the most courageous acts a human being can undertake. It's the moment we stop hiding and start revealing, not just to the world, but to ourselves. And in that moment, something incredible happens. A bridge begins to form. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we create opportunities for connection that simply cannot exist in any other way. I think about the conversations that have had the most profound impact on you. Were they the ones filled with polite small talk or carefully curated words designed to impress? Likely not. The most meaningful moments in our lives tend to arise from raw honesty, when someone looks you in the eye and shares a piece of their truth, even if it's messy, complicated, or difficult to say. That kind of openness disarms us. It cuts through the noise of pretense and surfaces something deeper, something real. The beauty of vulnerability is that it invites authenticity from others. It's like a beacon signaling to those around us, it's safe here. You don't have to pretend. When we take the first step to expose our genuine selves, others often feel inspired to do the same. There's a unique and profound energy in these exchanges, a shared humanity that reminds us we're not alone. The very things we fear will push others away, the cracks in our facade. The struggles we hide are often what draw people closer. But the power of vulnerability doesn't stop with emotional connection. It also has the potential to build trust. Trust is not built on perfection or invulnerability. We trust people who show us their imperfections because they remind us of our own. When we see someone admit their fears, flaws, or failures, we relate to them on a human level. They're no longer an unapproachable figure, but someone we can understand and empathize with. This mutual understanding fosters a bond that is difficult to break, yet vulnerability isn't easy. It takes immense courage to show up as you are, to risk being judged, misunderstood, or even rejected. That's why so many people choose to put up walls instead. It feels safer to guard our feelings and only let others see what we want them to see. But here's the irony: the walls we build to protect ourselves are often the very things that isolate us. They block out not just the pain, but also the joy, connection, and understanding we seek. Vulnerability is not about oversharing or putting all our problems on display. It's about being honest with ourselves and selective about how and when we share. It's the willingness to admit, I don't have it all figured out, or I'm struggling with this, and trusting that the person on the other side will meet you with compassion. Of course, not everyone will. Not every moment of vulnerability will result in connection. And that's okay. What matters is that you're creating the possibility for it. To many, vulnerability feels risky because it requires us to give up control. We can't predict how someone will respond or whether they'll validate our feelings. But in that surrender lies its strength. Vulnerability teaches us that life is not about perfect outcomes, but meaningful experiences. It's in the uncertainty that we grow, that we find courage, and that we discover just how resilient we can be. By embracing vulnerability, we're not just building bridges to others, we're building bridges to ourselves. It's impossible to connect with others in a meaningful way if we're disconnected from our own emotions. When we allow ourselves to feel deeply and to share those feelings, we align with our most authentic selves. That alignment brings clarity, purpose, and a profound sense of being alive. It helps us understand what matters most and allows us to prioritize relationships over appearances or achievements. Moreover, vulnerability is a powerful tool for creating change. When leaders demonstrate vulnerability, it empowers their teams to do the same. When friends open up, it deepens their bonds. And when strangers share their stories, it challenges perceptions and builds empathy. It's a domino effect, each act of openness inspiring another, until what once felt impossible, understanding, healing, connection becomes inevitable. Some may argue that vulnerability is unnecessary or that strength lies in independence. But real strength is not the ability to bear the weight of the world alone. Real strength is recognizing when you need support and having the courage to ask for it. It's an acknowledging that we are all, at our core, human beings navigating an imperfect world, doing our best with what we have. To admit that, to share that, is not weakness, it's bravery. Vulnerability is the foundation on which trust, compassion, and understanding are built. It's the bridge that brings us closer to one another, creating relationships that are not just functional but truly fulfilling. Connection is not merely something nice to have, it's a fundamental human need. It's as essential as water, food, or air. From the moment we come into this world, connection becomes the foundation of our survival. A newborn doesn't just need to be fed and clothed, they need touch, care, and the sound of a voice to thrive. That need doesn't disappear as we grow older, it evolves. Connection fuels us, not only physically, but emotionally and psychologically. Without it, we begin to wither. Many people misunderstand connection, thinking it's a bonus or something reserved for special moments. But if you strip everything else away, at the heart of all our desires and motivations is the need to belong. Consider the achievements people strive for, the wealth they accumulate, or even the social media posts they carefully curate. Underneath it all is a hope to feel seen, accepted, or understood by others. Whether it's love from a family member, approval from a peer, or validation from a larger group, we seek connection because it assures us that we're not alone in the world. Without connection, we experience loneliness, and loneliness isn't just an emotion, it's a signal. Just as hunger reminds us to eat, loneliness reminds us that we need relationships. Scientists have shown that chronic loneliness is as detrimental to our health as smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. It leads to stress, depression, and even physical illnesses. This isn't surprising when you think about how deeply wired for connection we are. The absence of it disrupts the balance we're meant to have. Connection is also the force that allows us to endure difficulty. Life isn't easy and challenges are unavoidable. Yet when we face those challenges with others by our side, the burden becomes lighter. It's not that our problems magically disappear, rather they become bearable because we feel supported. Knowing that someone is walking beside you, sharing the load, makes a world of difference. This shared experience of giving and receiving strength creates bonds that are nearly unbreakable. True connection requires effort. It's not enough to simply be around others. Presence without engagement is like standing next to a locked door. The door exists, but it serves no purpose if it's never opened. To connect, we need to open that door. We need to listen, not just hear. We need to ask questions and wait patiently for answers. We need to put down our phones and look someone in the eye. Connection flourishes in spaces where people feel valued and seen, and creating those spaces requires intentionality. It's tempting to think that the more people we surround ourselves with, the more connected we'll feel, but quantity is not the same as quality. You can be in a room full of people and still feel utterly alone if the interactions lack depth or authenticity. Real connection isn't about numbers, it's about substance. It's about vulnerability, empathy, and shared understanding. These are the threads that weave strong relationships, whether with one person or a few. They remind us that our value doesn't come from fitting a mold, but from being accepted as we are. We sometimes hesitate to seek connection because of fear. Fear of rejection, fear of judgment, fear of being misunderstood. But these fears can trap us in isolation. The irony is that many people are waiting for someone to make the first move, to take the first step toward genuine interaction. By reaching out, by being the one to initiate, you often open the door for someone else to feel seen and valued. That willingness to connect not only enriches their life, but yours as well. Technology, while a powerful tool for keeping us in touch, sometimes complicates our understanding of connection. Sending a text or liking a photo can feel like interaction, but it often lacks the depth of real engagement. True connection isn't just a notification or a quick emoji. It's the moments when someone hears your silence and asks if you're okay. It's when someone shows up, not because they have to, but because they want to. These are the moments that remind us of the profound impact connection has on our lives. Connection isn't just about relationships with others, it's also about the relationship we have with ourselves. When we feel disconnected internally, when we ignore our emotions, neglect our needs, or lose touch with our purpose, we become less available for others. To truly connect with those around us, we need to stay grounded in our own truth. That inner alignment creates space for genuine interactions and fosters healthier, more meaningful relationships. We can't do life alone. Even the most independent person needs the occasional hand to hold, ear to listen, or voice to reassure. It's not a sign of weakness to acknowledge this, it's a testament to our humanity. Connection is not just a gift we offer others, it's a gift we offer ourselves. It enriches our lives, strengthens our communities, and reminds us why we're here. Sharing pain is a transformative act. It is one of those simple yet profound things that can fundamentally alter how we navigate the most challenging moments of our lives. Pain, in its rawest form, often feels like a weight that is too heavy to carry alone. It pulls us inward, isolating us in a cocoon of sadness, stress, or fear. But when we find the courage to open up and share that pain with someone else, something extraordinary happens. The burden feels lighter, more bearable, and easier to manage. Sharing doesn't erase the pain, but it changes the way we experience it. When we share our pain, we're not just seeking to unburden ourselves, we're inviting someone else into our experience. We are asking for connection, for understanding, for a moment where someone looks us in the eye and says, "I hear you. I see you." That acknowledgement is powerful. It doesn't fix the situation, but it validates our feelings and reminds us that we are not alone in our struggles. That simple act of recognition can bring an incredible sense of relief. In sharing our pain, we begin to dismantle the loneliness that often accompanies it. This isn't just about emotional relief, it's about the science of how we're wired as humans. When we share our struggles, the act triggers a biological response. Oxytocin, the hormone associated with bonding and trust, is released, creating a sense of safety and reducing stress. This is why talking to someone, even for a few minutes, can feel like a weight is being lifted off our shoulders. Our brains are wired to seek connection, especially during moments of difficulty. By reaching out and sharing our pain, we allow ourselves to tap into the natural mechanisms of comfort and healing. Sharing pain is not a one-way transaction. It's an exchange. When we open up to someone, we're not just lightening our own load, we're creating a space for them to feel empowered to do the same. There's something deeply human about the reciprocity that comes with shared vulnerability. Often, when we admit that we're struggling, we find that others have been quietly carrying their own burdens too. Our openness gives them permission to share their pain, creating a mutual bond that strengthens both people involved. This shared experience builds trust, and trust is the foundation of any meaningful relationship. The idea that sharing pain can benefit both parties might sound counterintuitive. After all, when you think of someone unloading their struggles onto someone else, it might seem like a burden for the listener. But more often than not, it's the opposite. When someone shares their pain with you, they're telling you that they trust you, that they value you enough to be honest with you. That sense of being trusted and needed is not a burden, it's a gift. It gives us a purpose in that moment, the chance to be there for someone else, to play a role in easing their journey. This act of sharing and listening creates a ripple effect. Once we've experienced the relief that comes from sharing pain or the fulfillment that comes from supporting someone else, we become more inclined to repeat the act. And the more we share and support, the more it normalizes the idea that it's okay to open up, that vulnerability is not a weakness, but a strength. Over time, this openness strengthens relationships, creates tighter-knit communities, and fosters a culture of empathy. However, sharing pain is not without its challenges. It can feel incredibly vulnerable to let someone into your struggles. Fear of being judged, rejected, or misunderstood often holds people back from opening up. But it's important to remember that not everyone will respond to your pain in the same way. Some might not know how to react, and that's okay. The act of sharing is still meaningful, even if the person you share with isn't immediately equipped to provide the support you need. What matters is that you are practicing the courage it takes to be vulnerable, and in doing so, you are breaking the cycle of silence. It's also important to note that the act of sharing pain doesn't always require words. Sometimes it's about being present with someone else, even in silence. Sitting with someone who is struggling without trying to fix or analyze their feelings can be one of the most supportive things we can do. It communicates that you are there, that they are not alone, and that their pain matters. When we choose to keep our struggles hidden, we cut ourselves off from the opportunity to connect and heal. Pain thrives in isolation. It feeds off the silence and grows in the dark corners where we try to hide it. But when we bring that pain into the light, when we share it with someone else, it loses its grip on us. It doesn't disappear entirely, but it becomes something we can face together rather than something we bear alone. The act of sharing pain turns a solitary struggle into a shared journey, one where mutual support creates strength that neither person could achieve on their own. Silence in moments of struggle can feel like the easiest option. When the weight of life becomes too much, when fear or doubt takes hold, or when pain becomes too sharp to bear, withdrawing into silence seems safe. It requires no effort to explain, no vulnerability to show, and no risk of misunderstanding or rejection. But silence, when it comes to the challenges of life, has a dangerous way of growing into isolation. What begins as a quiet reprieve often becomes an echo chamber for our thoughts, magnifying feelings of loneliness and despair. Silence in these moments doesn't help us heal, it holds us captive. There's a misconception many of us have that strong people deal with their struggles alone. We're taught from a young age that asking for help is a sign of weakness, that handling things ourselves is the ultimate demonstration of resilience. Yet nothing could be further from the truth. Strength doesn't lie in the ability to stay silent. Strength is found in the courage to communicate, to reach out and share what's weighing us down. When we break the silence and invite others into our world, we aren't giving up our independence, we're embracing our humanity. When someone chooses to open up about their struggles, it changes the narrative. Silence allows the story of loneliness and helplessness to dominate, while communication interrupts that pattern. Speaking, sharing, or even letting a single person know you're not okay rewrites that story. It adds a voice to the silence, a connection to the isolation, and a chance to challenge the feelings of despair. The communication isn't just about finding solutions, it's about creating understanding and building a bridge out of the isolation that silence creates. The danger of silence is that it can be self-perpetuating. When you keep your struggles to yourself, you may start to feel that others won't understand, or worse, that they don't care. But here's the truth. People can only help when they know you need it. No one can read minds or magically sense what's hidden behind a smile or a quick "I'm fine." Silence keeps others in the dark, leaving them unable to offer support. This doesn't mean everyone will respond perfectly, but opening the door to communication gives those who care about you the chance to step in and help. Silence also has a way of distorting our perceptions. When we hold our struggles inside, they often feel larger, heavier, and more permanent than they really are. The mind left alone with its fears can spiral into worst-case scenarios or exaggerated outcomes. But when we speak about our struggles, something remarkable happens. The words themselves create clarity. Hearing our own thoughts expressed aloud can make them feel more manageable, less overwhelming. And when someone listens, their perspective can help us see angles and solutions we hadn't considered before. The act of sharing your struggles is not just for your own benefit, it can also have a profound impact on the person you share with. Opening up about what you're going through lets others know that they, too, can speak up when they need help. Vulnerability inspires vulnerability. When one person breaks the silence, it sends a signal that it's okay to talk about difficult things, creating an environment where others feel safer doing the same. This ripple effect can transform relationships and even whole communities, fostering a culture where communication and support replace silence and isolation. Breaking the silence isn't always about finding the perfect words or waiting for the perfect moment. Often it's about simply starting the conversation, even if it's messy or incomplete. It could be as simple as saying, "I'm struggling," or "I don't know how to handle this." These small acts of communication can open the door to connection and support. The act itself matters far more than the way it's expressed. It signals to the people around you that you're willing to let them in, that you're ready to break the barrier silence creates. It's important to recognize that not all silence is deliberate. Some people remain quiet about their struggles because they don't believe anyone will listen or care. This is why creating a culture of communication is so critical. Being someone who listens without judgment, who offers understanding instead of unsolicited advice, can make all the difference. Sometimes all it takes is one person to show that they're willing to listen for someone else to feel safe enough to speak up. Silence can also be intimidating because it feels irreversible, as if breaking it requires some monumental step. But the truth is, silence can be broken in small ways. Sending a text, making a call, or simply asking for time to talk are powerful first steps. They may feel insignificant, but they create openings for connection. These small actions are the building blocks of trust and support, leading to conversations that can help you rediscover strength and perspective. Letting go of silence doesn't mean that every word will be perfectly received or that every person will respond the way you hope. But it's not about achieving perfection, it's about giving yourself a chance. Silence closes doors, but communication opens them. By choosing to speak, you give yourself the opportunity to find allies, solutions, and hope, even in the most difficult moments. Crying alone is an act many people experience in silence, hidden from the world, often cloaked in shame or the belief that they must shoulder their pain without involving anyone else. It's a deeply human response to emotion, yet many of us feel a pressure to keep it hidden. The solitude feels safe, free from judgment, free from questions, free from vulnerability. But crying alone also carries the risk of reinforcing a false belief that we must always navigate our struggles in isolation. It perpetuates the idea that our pain is ours alone to bear, that no one else can understand, and that revealing it would make us weaker or lesser in the eyes of others. The truth is, crying is not a sign of weakness. It's a natural and necessary release, a signal from our bodies and minds that we've reached a point where the emotions we've been holding in can no longer be contained. In those tears are frustration, exhaustion, sadness, or even relief, all forms of emotion that demand an outlet. But while crying in itself is cathartic, doing so in complete solitude can lead to a sense of being disconnected from the world, amplifying feelings of loneliness and isolation. When we cry alone, we often convince ourselves that we're the only ones struggling, that our pain separates us from everyone else, making us feel even more distant from the connection we truly need. There is a profound difference between crying alone and crying in the presence of another. When we cry alone, it's often a solitary act of release that ends with no resolution, no change in perspective, no added comfort. But crying in front of someone who cares can transform that experience. To cry in someone's presence is to share a part of yourself, to let them into your vulnerability, and to allow them to stand with you in your pain. It's an act of trust, and in many cases, that trust is met with understanding, compassion, and validation. It turns a moment of isolation into an opportunity for connection, for support, and for healing. When we cry in the presence of someone else, we also give them a chance to be there for us, to offer what they can, whether that's words of comfort, a listening ear, or simply their quiet presence. This act of being seen and supported, even in our most vulnerable moments, has a transformative power. It reminds us that we don't have to face everything alone, that there are people who care and are willing to carry part of our burden. These moments can deepen relationships, creating bonds built on authenticity and mutual respect. Crying is often seen as something private, something to be hidden away from the eyes of others. Many of us grew up with messages like "be strong" or "don't cry in public," reinforcing the idea that showing emotion is a sign of weakness or lack of control. But these messages are harmful because they deny the basic truth that emotions are what make us human. Crying is not something to be ashamed of. It's a reminder that we are alive, that we feel deeply, and that we care. It's a universal experience, one that everyone can relate to, even if the reasons for crying are different. In many ways, tears are a language that transcends words, a way of expressing the depths of what we're going through. What keeps so many people from crying in front of others is fear. Fear of judgment, fear of being perceived as weak, or fear of being seen as a burden. These fears are often deeply ingrained, shaped by cultural norms, societal expectations, or personal experiences. But the reality is that most people are far more compassionate than we give them credit for. When someone sees another person crying, their instinct is rarely to judge. Instead, they feel empathy, a desire to help, or simply a recognition of shared humanity. It's a moment where walls come down, where pretense is stripped away, and where genuine connection becomes possible. To cry in front of someone is not just about receiving comfort, it's also about giving them a chance to show up for you, to be there for you in a way that strengthens your bond. It's a gift to let someone see the real you, unfiltered and unguarded. When you allow someone into that vulnerable space, you communicate trust, and trust is one of the most powerful foundations for any relationship. In many ways, these moments are opportunities not just to receive support, but to grow closer to the people who matter most. There's also something incredibly freeing about allowing yourself to cry in front of others. It breaks down the facade of perfection, letting go of the exhausting effort to appear like you have everything under control. This openness can be a relief, a reminder that you don't have to always be strong in the conventional sense. True strength often lies in vulnerability, in the willingness to admit when things are difficult, and to let others see you for who you are, imperfections and all. By crying alone, we deny ourselves the comfort and connection that comes from being open with others. We reinforce the narrative that we must carry everything on our own, even when it's clear that no one was ever meant to do so. Sharing those moments of deep emotion, of tears and truth, doesn't diminish us, it humanizes us. It bridges the gap between individuals, allowing us to step into the kind of support and solidarity that reminds us we are never truly alone. The fear of being vulnerable is one of the most deeply ingrained fears we face as human beings. Vulnerability makes us feel exposed, uncertain, and sometimes dangerously unprotected. It's an uncomfortable space to occupy, yet vulnerability is not only an inevitable part of our lives, but also the very thing that allows us to build meaningful relationships. It is the paradox of human existence. In our greatest moments of vulnerability, we open ourselves to our deepest forms of connection. But before we can experience this bond, we must confront our fear of being seen for who we truly are. In many ways, vulnerability is a form of strength. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we give others the opportunity to connect with us on a level that goes far beyond surface interactions. Instead of presenting a facade that hides our true feelings, vulnerabilities expose the parts of ourselves that are real, raw, and unwashed. That's where real human connection happens, when we share our struggles, our hopes and our dreams without hiding behind false pretenses. Vulnerability requires trust, and trust is the foundation on which meaningful relationships are built. Without it, even the most closely knit groups will remain at arm's length, never fully understanding one another or supporting one another in a truly deep way. Most people have experienced the reluctance to be vulnerable, and with good reason. In a world that often values strength, confidence, and independence, admitting our flaws or limitations can seem like a threat to our identity. We may fear judgment or rejection from those around us, thinking that our imperfections will somehow make us less worthy of love or acceptance. We may feel as though vulnerability is a sign of weakness, a failing we must conceal in order to be seen as competent and capable. Yet, this view of vulnerability is one-dimensional. True vulnerability does not make us weak, it makes us authentic. It makes us human. By pushing vulnerability aside, we often miss the opportunity to truly connect with others. When we present a version of ourselves that is perfect and impenetrable, we're communicating to the people around us that they too must maintain an illusion of perfection. This creates a distance, a wall between us. When we choose to be vulnerable, we give others permission to do the same. It sets the stage for deeper conversations, for true understanding, and for relationships that are meaningful not because of how much we have in common, but because of our willingness to embrace one another's imperfections. In sharing our vulnerabilities, we give others the chance to witness our struggles and offer empathy, support, or simply a listening ear. This is the beginning of trust, and trust is the true glue that holds relationships together, whether romantic, familial, or platonic. Fear of vulnerability also comes with the misunderstanding that we need to have everything figured out. We might feel as though there's an ideal version of ourselves, one that we must meet before we can allow others to see who we truly are. Yet that version often doesn't exist. Growth doesn't happen from hiding our vulnerabilities, but from embracing them. It's in the messy moments, in the setbacks, and the shortcomings that we discover who we are and who we want to become. Vulnerability allows us to reflect on these experiences and share them with others, acknowledging our flaws while recognizing our capacity for resilience, growth, and change. Vulnerability is not about seeking pity or attention, rather it is about inviting others into the reality of who we are. When we choose to share our pain or our uncertainties, we offer people the opportunity to show up for us in ways that allow them to feel included in our journey. In this space, there is room for mutual growth. The trust we establish through vulnerability creates a connection that transcends words. It's about giving people the opportunity to relate to us not as polished individuals, but as imperfect beings trying their best, just like everyone else. The connection we forge in these moments is often one that remains unspoken. It doesn't require grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It's simply the acknowledgement of shared humanity, something that exists beneath our external differences and between the lines of our words. Despite the profound nature of vulnerability, there's also an inherent danger in not being willing to open up to others. When we stay locked in emotional isolation, we deny ourselves the chance to receive compassion or support. By keeping ourselves walled off from others, we leave our most painful experiences to fester in the silence. Not only does this prevent us from seeking help or advice, but it also sends the message that we believe we have to do everything on our own. And this simply isn't true. It's through vulnerability that we recognize our need for connection with others, and through that connection, we unlock the potential for healing, comfort, and understanding. Embracing vulnerability does not mean we should always expose ourselves to everyone at every moment. There's a balance between sharing openly with those who can offer empathy and support and maintaining healthy boundaries to protect ourselves. Vulnerability, when nurtured with care and discernment, can lead to growth and strengthened connections. It's not a weakness. It's a willingness to stand in the mess and complexity of life and remain open to what others bring to the table. In this openness, we not only experience deeper connections with others, but we also gain a better understanding of ourselves. We realize that we don't have to be perfect to be worthy of love and compassion, that our flaws and uncertainties are simply part of the unique human experience we share with the world around us. In moments of crisis, our instinct often leads us to retreat into ourselves, seeking solitude as a way to shield us from further pain or scrutiny. It's a response rooted in the belief that we must carry our burdens alone, that our struggles are ours to bear, and no one else's. The isolation feels safer than reaching out, especially when it seems that no one could possibly understand the depth of what we're going through. We fear that sharing our difficulties will burden those around us, or that people won't know how to respond, further deepening the feeling of being misunderstood. But this instinct to withdraw is not only isolating, it can also be counterproductive, hindering our ability to heal, grow, or even see things from a clearer perspective. There's a powerful irony in the idea that we must carry our pain alone. As human beings, we are inherently social creatures. We seek connection, understanding, and the comfort that only others can provide when times are tough. Our minds are wired for empathy and shared experiences, which means that, despite our fears, the most significant moments of personal growth and emotional healing often come through the relationships we build during challenging times. When we allow ourselves to open up and let others share in our burdens, something remarkable happens. We discover the strength and resilience that comes from solidarity. At the core of the human experience lies a deep need to feel seen and understood. Our pain, though deeply personal, is often not as unique or isolating as it feels in the moment. The human condition is vast and varied, and though we may experience life's difficulties in different ways, there are common threads that bind us all. It's in acknowledging this shared experience, this universal thread of vulnerability, that we realize we are not alone in our suffering. When we are able to turn to others, whether they are close family members, friends, or even strangers, we open the door to mutual understanding and healing. The act of sharing our pain doesn't diminish us. It connects us, providing both us and those who listen with the opportunity to grow together. Moreover, reaching out for support during difficult times helps to break the dangerous cycle of negative thinking and emotional spirals that isolation often breeds. In moments of struggle, our minds can amplify our challenges, turning our emotions into overwhelming forces that cloud our judgment. In solitude, we're left to wrestle with these emotions alone, unable to gain perspective or break free from the emotional entanglement that keeps us trapped. However, when we speak to someone else, when we share our experience, we often find that those emotions begin to feel more manageable. A fresh perspective from someone who isn't entrenched in the same emotional turmoil can help to reframe the situation, offering clarity that we may not have been able to find on our own. While this can be a difficult and vulnerable act to begin, the benefits of allowing someone else into our pain cannot be overstated. When we share our struggles, we give others permission to do the same. This reciprocity is an essential part of human interaction. It encourages openness, fosters empathy, and nurtures the creation of deeper, more meaningful relationships. It's in those honest conversations where raw emotions are expressed and where silence is occasionally needed for shared understanding that we form the bonds that sustain us through future trials. The support we receive from others is also one of the most validating experiences in times of distress. It tells us that what we are going through matters and that our suffering is not overlooked. When we are heard, really heard, there is an acknowledgement of our pain that helps it to feel less weighty and less solitary. In this shared moment, we realize that we do not have to carry the burden alone. The pain is still real, but the experience of being understood, even in silence, alleviates its intensity. This is the power of being seen, of being acknowledged not just for our strengths, but for our vulnerabilities and weaknesses. Additionally, the act of sharing our pain challenges our assumptions about the expectations others place on us. Often we fear that people will view us as weak or fragile if we allow ourselves to be vulnerable. Yet when we let others into our struggles, we often find that what they see is strength in the act of being real, courage in the act of asking for help, and a deeper appreciation for who we are as individuals. Most people don't respond with judgment, but rather with compassion, often offering their own struggles in return, thus creating an environment where mutual support becomes the foundation of the relationship. Vulnerability, far from being a flaw, is actually what leads to the most authentic connections. Understanding that we don't have to endure our pain alone offers an incredible sense of relief and empowerment. The thought that we have the ability to reach out and receive the support we need can transform how we approach difficulties in life. We begin to see our challenges not as insurmountable walls, but as temporary obstacles that are made easier to overcome with the support of others. We shift from being isolated sufferers to part of a collective experience, one that allows us to see not just the limits of our own endurance, but also the vast, interconnected web of humanity that provides the strength to continue moving forward. In this sense, sharing pain with others is not about minimizing what we go through, it is about creating a space for growth, healing, and mutual support. It is in the acknowledgement of our shared experiences and vulnerabilities that we find the capacity to overcome, to rebuild, and to move forward. While it's true that pain is deeply personal, it is also universal. And it is in this understanding that we discover not only the resilience to face our own struggles, but the deep joy of being part of a community that helps us rise above them. We are not meant to cry alone. We are meant to hold each other up, to remind each other that it's okay to feel, to struggle, and to heal. So tonight I challenge you, the next time you feel overwhelmed, don't retreat into silence. Reach out. Be the voice that says, I'm here. And if someone reaches out to you, don't just say, let me know if you need anything. Show up. Because the strength of a community is not in its ability to celebrate together. It's in its willingness to cry together. Never cry alone. Thank you.